which was a really nice event. Jack's, yeah.
Everybody get your coffee cup filled,
Yeah.
or there's some apple cider
It was
over there.
wonderful. And I hope, well, certainly in planning my dad's, it warmed my heart to plan an event for him. Oh, sorry, I digressed though. Speaking of arms that move
I know, I
screens up and
noticed. I
down.
already looked at
Sorry.
it. I was like, oh, there you go. There you go. There's something just like that.
But yeah, it was well done, and I hope it warmed your hearts to it was really well planned.
What's going on, by the way, folks? This is our little work show, so it's kind of aimed at the holidays, of course. So they're small pieces and they're mostly a little cheaper, okay? And there'll be a reception on Friday afternoon. And Ariana's also got this deal, or Ariana and Coley, this deal cooked up for discounts on art supplies and books. So come on in Friday.
Friday.
Yeah. Yeah, Friday, noon to 4. So, what else do I have to announce? Oh, if we have any artists here, or tell your artist friends, the Wallowa Work Show, you remember we had the show called Livestock last January? So we had a lot of livestock, you know, sheep and cows and pigs and whatnot, and workers who work with them. Well, this show is called Wallowa Works, so it extends beyond the cowboys and the sheepherds. So you can go out and either your own or your friend's work that depicts any kind of working in Wallowa County, okay? Working and living here. And then, pardon? Oh, and before we get started, David, of course, is with the Wallowa History Center, as is Jenny. And Jenny has...
Marilyn?
Okay, I'm sorry. And, yeah, they came all the way from Wallowa to check on their guy. He's going to do the presentation in Wallowa, so that we're the practice room.
Yeah.
And,
Actually, can I say something, Rich?
sure.
More than a practice run. David's sharing some great tools today, and we like to host a community of historians working on like-minded projects. So David at the end will remind you, but I have a sign-up form if you want to connect with the group of historians and be part of the effort. Don't slip out without sharing your contact
Right.
information for the sign-up.
And I'll vouch for, join the Wallowa History Center and get their quarterly. It's a really cheap deal and a good little magazine. Oh, just look at that. She's so on top of things.
Just in time to renew, we have a couple members, Jen's a member, I believe, too. So, if you need to renew your membership or become a new member, we have the 2025 membership forms as well.
Okay. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce David Weaver. And David is what I would call an obsessive researcher.
Yeah, I think that's really,
He can rarely get enough and always has to go and get more. So today we're talking about, he's interested in what happened in Wallowa County. But in order to really know about Wallowa County, you gotta know what happened with the Nez Perce and the early settlers. And in order to know about the Nez Perce, you had to know what happened in the Modoc War. And so now he's on this big rage of going to the Modoc War, and then he just told me, a lot of our Wallowa County settlers came via the gold rush in California and then came up here. So now he's got to read about the fracases between the Indians and the gold miners in California. Anyway, that's just a little bit of where this guy might take you. So be careful. But anyway, I hope you all know David. He was played. I met him. I didn't meet him, but I watched him play basketball.
A few years.
Now he's retired from state forestry. God almighty. How did that?
Yeah.
I watched you play basketball too.
Well, yeah, I was going to say. Yeah. Oh, geez.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
there you go, David. Enjoy.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Rich. Yeah, today, hopefully, I'll zip through this pretty quick. It's quite a bit of information, but hopefully it'll be useful or some parts interesting. What I wanted to do is start out with just sharing our mission a little bit as far as the History Center, and we basically function as a research library. So as opposed to physical objects, we're looking at photographs, diaries, documents, all that sort of stuff that we can get our hands on, whether we personally have it in our collection or we've made digital copies. So, and our main mission there is connecting people with those stories, whatever particular story it is, and in kind of engaging folks with the story of this place. So that's really what we're about. And as part of that, I wanted to talk about a few of the tools that I don't think people maybe are aware of that are on our website, which can connect you with some stuff that is online as far as Wallowa County history, where, 20 years ago when Grace Bartlett was doing her great book, The Wallowa Country, 1867-77, it was a lot harder to do this sort of research. As you're on the typewriter, no email and letters back and forth between National Archives, and it was just a lot slower. There's really been a revolution in history because of the digitization projects that have gone on in the last, 15, 20 years or so. So I'll be sharing a bit of that and a little bit of the context around some of the sort of important historical sources for Wallowa County. So with that, and again, I apologize, I'm going to zip pretty quick, so you can always just yell at me or woe me up a little bit if I'm moving along a little too quickly. So again, on our website, if you go to the resource tab there, it'll land you on this page, and then you can follow these links. Today, I'm basically going to cover important early historic works that we've digitized, and then the surveys and land claims, and the digitized newspapers that are available. And so, first, under the sort of category of important histories for Wallowa County is the History of Union Wallowa County. It's published in 1902. I remember when I first, 15 or 20 years ago, really started trying to understand Wallowa County history a little better. This was usually cited as Old Wallowa County History. And I was like, well, what is this? Where do you find this? What is this book? Turns out it's the History of Union and Wallowa Counties, published in 1902. And it, like a lot of these were published all over the United States, basically from about the Civil War era up through the early 1900s. And their various companies did these. For instance, Baker County has one. It's Baker, Grant, Malheur, so it covers all three counties. That's not uncommon. So the fact that it covers both Union and Wallowa is pretty standard business. It just has a general history of both Union and Wallowa County, plus kind of an overview of Oregon history, but it's got a bunch of biographical sketches which have been leaned on really heavily by historians as far as local folks here, early settlers, and then it includes some photographs in there as well. And these were kind of for-profit publications, and so you'd probably seen the History of Wallowa County, the newer versions where people send in their biography and it gets printed in there in exchange. You pay a little bit and then you get a copy. That's basically what these were. Wallowa County's history is pretty interesting in that book. And as far as the method that they were using, you can see they've got some early pioneers from Union County, some early pioneers from Wallowa County. In our case, this was published by the Western Historical Publishing Company, and the group of folk, early pioneer men, who vetted this book, sat and listened to good portions of it being read to them, and they sort of certified that it was good information, that group there. In terms of the history, it's pretty good history. There's a little bit of maybe misinformation in there, but generally it's pretty good. But I would say one thing that makes it really interesting is in terms of the historiography of it. I've pulled a little blip out of there in terms of the history of Wallowa County on that early settlement period. You can see there it says, the early history of Wallowa Valley is an interesting chapter in the history of the race war by which white energy, determination, and superior intelligence wrested the new world from the lethargic, dusky nomad whose heritage it was. So it gives you a sense of sort of where folks were at in terms of how, and a reminder that, you know, histories are manufactured objects. They're made by people and they have certain perspectives. And this perspective was not at all uncommon at the time. So it really has a value in just that, like understanding people's perspectives, and especially in terms of native and settler relations. It also contains just a pile of, I think, roughly about 150 biographical sketches of folks from early pioneers. They usually start out, since folks were paying to have this done, and basically subscribing before the book come out, and they were interviewed, of course, about their life. But you'll see that the intros are pretty flattering, and this is common. You know, with Mary Probst still here, it says, among those who have displayed ability to handle successfully a stock-raising business and general farming stands prominently the lady whose name is at the head of this article, and it now becomes our pleasant privilege to outline her life's career, wherein she has ever manifested both graciousness and capability, ever showing forth these priceless qualities of noble womanhood and faithfully performing the portion allotted to her hands during her pilgrimage. So it's pretty flowery, ornate language, generally designed to flatter whoever it was that was getting their little biographical piece put in there, but they contain a whole wealth of information, and later historians have really used those extensively because they contain information about some of the settlers' lives that you're just probably not going to find anywhere. So Mary Probst was a really interesting character, settled out here in Prairie Creek. She basically functioned as the community doctor, even though she wasn't a doctor. Tough as nails lady. One of the stories that Horner tells about her is that when everybody else was fording up at the Prairie Creek fort, she was one of the few who said, nah, and she just took her kids out each evening during the Bannock War and hid out in the brush on their ranch every evening. So, interesting character, really interesting woman. And then another thing it does, it gives a history of the current towns at 1902 in Wallowa County, and it gives the business listings and a bit of history of each of those communities and settlements. And so you'll see, for instance, in Joseph, it will list all of the businesses in Joseph. And so just really interesting from that to get kind of a snapshot of the county at that time and what the settlements and communities were. And then political history. Too soon? One of the things that hasn't been written about, I think you'd have to search really hard to find any writing about the political history of Wallowa County. Of course, it's a small community, kind of a dicey subject, but it's really an interesting part of Wallowa County history that you're not going to find much written about. So this book really covers the political history of Wallowa County up to 1902 in depth. And so it's really interesting to read some of that stuff, and including who got elected what year for county courts and that sort of thing. And you know, it does a good job of covering the populist movement, roughly that late 1890s period. Really interesting political movement, and the county had voted populist in a few of those. So. Really interesting chapter of Wallowa County history, I think. And then just in terms of searching it, so if you do go to our website and click the link, the easiest way to search this document is just download it, save it to your laptop, pull it back up as a PDF, and then you can search any term in there. It's a really easy way to do that. You do have to save it to your laptop. You could also, I think this one's formatted for your phone, so you could also just do that on your phone and search on your phone. But you can see here, I've searched Imnaha. Here's what's come up from Imnaha. You can see to the far right there, let's see, I got it right in here. These are all the search results for Imnaha. So quite a pile of things referencing Imnaha. Just makes it really easy if you have a family member you're looking for, type in the family member name and see what comes up. Really makes research a lot easier and quicker. Of course, another, probably the most famous thing is, you know, the father of Wallowa County history, John Horner, the Horner Papers. you can, well, I'll get to that. But, 1,582 pages, typewritten pages of his Wallowa County history, and it's roughly organized by place name, but it's notoriously hard to read. And Horner was obviously a very intelligent man, but he had, I think, at best, an 8th grade education. His writing skills, a little sketchy. So you'll see commas and periods and sentence fragments and whole pages that are basically a sentence. So it is a little bit to read through and search for a particular thing. And roughly, Horner was collecting this information about 1916, right up through the end of his life. Oops, going the wrong way. So just a bit about, and this is just a bit, Horner's a really interesting character, but he was born in Kansas. They made a few stops, including Boise City, and were there for a number of years. They didn't make it out here to Wallowa County until '84, and then they, both him, his mother, he was 12 years old when they arrived. His mother and father homesteaded up Camp Creek, and then John Harley went up the creek a bit and had his own homestead at the junction of Camp and Trail Creek. And then in 1906, he left the Imnaha area and moved up to Enterprise. He spent many years as an adult going back and forth between California, where his sister was, and to friends in the Willamette Valley, particularly Beaverton. So a lot of those years, he was here part of the year and gone in the winter. He started collecting history around 1960, and he worked at a lot of different jobs, but towards the end, he was a Wallowa County assessor, and he also started the nascent Wallowa County Museum about 1927. Just prior to his death, he was working with Caxton publishers to publish his papers. But I imagine when Caxton received the document, they were probably scratching their head. It would took a massive editing job to get it into a actually readable form. And so they actually turned him down in 1952. And then,
so David, what was his relationship with Grace? Did Grace actually do some of the typing?
My understanding, he did some, and then
Martin?
Yes, did quite a bit of the type. Yeah, most of the typing, I think. They of course worked closely together, and when Grace came in, they worked on things together. But Grace is a fine writer, really good writer. And Horner, I only have one piece of writing out of Horner that was published in the 1902 Chieftain, where he's detailing the history of the road into Imnaha. But basically, he never wrote anything. Yes?
Did he also own land in Promise? I believe I've seen his name on the Promise plat map.
He actually made a homestead claim later at the mouth of Buck Creek and Mud Creek off of Pawodka, so about mid-Pawodka Ridge, down in the very bottom at the confluence, right on top of a large native encampment. So he had that out there, and he began that about 1914, built his own cabin.
So he did actually live there. He wasn't just taking land for speculation.
Yeah, and his brother had a place up on top of Pawodka, so he was out there for a while. He evidently sold it at some point, but there was no way in there besides packing in on a mule. So it was a very remote spot. And then, as in '52, he had some pretty serious health problems, and he was confined to the hospital. And he came out with a friend and out of the hospital for the day to go to his house. And it's pretty clear he didn't want to stay in the hospital, so he told his friend, "Hang on a minute, I'm going to grab something out of the garage." He went to the garage and he shot himself with a pistol because I don't think living in the hospital was what he wanted to do. And then, his photographs, the other thing is about his photographs, he took quite a number of photographs himself, particularly when he began looking at all the historical information for Wallowa County. And this is something from the Wallowa County Museum collection, but it's W.W. White, Wesley White, and then in the middle is the improbably named Americus McAlexander, and next to him is James Tolley. And they're standing at the spot of old Joseph's grave just outside of Wallowa. Horner obviously has taken the photograph. And just because the Wallowa Sun reported on that, we know the exact day there, August 1st, 1918, when they were out. And as you know, he, of course, was instrumental in moving that grave up here to Wallowa Lake. Another example of his photographs, these are in the what are known as the scrapbooks. And so mostly Horner put these together. Also members of the Wallowa County Pioneer Association also helped put them together. This is the Indian scrapbook that has a lot of Horner's pictures of native folk here in Wallowa County. You know, from the teens up through the 30s, really rare and great photographs of native presence from Wallowa County. They contain all kinds of stuff, newspaper clippings, all kinds of bits and bobs that Horner thought were important. These were originally in the Enterprise Public Library, and then as the museum sort of got up and rolling, they eventually, of course, landed up here in Joseph at the County Museum. Oops, did I go too far? Another thing, you know, talking about the museum pieces, when Horner was the assessor of the county, the first iteration of the museum really was the Chamber of Commerce building, or excuse me, the Commercial Club building in Enterprise. Before that, it was his assessor's office. So people would bring him things, and he had his office and his house in Enterprise filled with these sort of things. And about 27 or so, they moved that stuff into the Commercial Club's public rooms in Enterprise and had a little museum display in there. You could see some of these odd and sort of great native artifacts that have come from Wallowa County, which the one on the left there is in the County Museum collection. The one in the up the top there, that stone bear, is in Belgium currently. As far as searching these, again, if you hit the tab J.H. Horner Papers there on our website, again, it'll take you to the document, and this is the original document at Oregon State Historical Society. So you get to see all the scratch outs and where he made annotations and notes and all that. And so I think it's really useful to use this particular copy, but you do have to save it to be able to search it. Download, save, search. And here in this case, I've typed in Indian. You can see again off to the far right there, all the things where Indians have come up, so a pile. And in this case, he's noting that, you know, Spalding came in here, really the first actually recorded account of Euro-American coming into Wallowa County. Very interesting account. But yeah, this is, as far as this document, this is a really helpful way to search and look through it for family names, whatever you're interested in. And then another big one that you can search is the General Land Office records, which is the Bureau of Land Management for homestead claims, township plat maps, and field survey notes. Very handy. This is an example of a homestead claim for Logan McCormick, a relative of mine. You can see that on the right there, that's his actual deed. It shows the legal location, and I've just drawn his homestead. You can see that he's out sort of at the junction of Lewis and Pine Creek out there by Greenwood Butte, and there's Zumwalt proper over here. So it'll list the total acres, the year of issuance. So a little bit about that. It was issued in this case in 1910, but the prove-up process for a homestead, 5 years, and then you had 2 years to gain 3 witnesses. So you'd go get your 3 neighboring witnesses, affidavits, take it in. So in theory, you had 7 years to file your claim. A lot of folks actually they weren't too in a hurry to file their claims because you didn't have to pay taxes until you got the deed. So a lot of times they drug their feet on that. However, if they had not registered it, there was always a chance that someone could jump your claim. And that did happen. So
So how much, was $1.25 an acre after you proved up?
there's two ways. There's preemption, which is the older form. You could pay outright $1.25. You could pay that over time. That's called the Preemption Act. The Homestead Act, you would just come in, your initial filing, I believe, depending on the year, was $5. So, but at the time, $5, a little bit of money. So again, they would go in and register that piece of ground, hold it with the $5 filing fee, and then a little additional fee. But if you built the house, if you were there continually present for 5 years and did some other improvements, you got it for free.
For free?
Yep. But a lot of folks just did the preemption, and if they had the money, they paid the $1.25 per acre, and you could pay that in 3 installments over 5 years.
Okay.
That's a whole rabbit trail of stuff. A lot of times, the earlier ones, you can get the actual deed image out of BLM. A lot of them have not been digitized, particularly the old ones. But if you email them, say, hey, I want the deed for such and such, they can get it to you. The other interesting thing, I think, are these plat maps. I love to look at them. The drawings, I think, are really impressive. This, of course, is Wallowa Lake, surveyed in '81. That little gap up on the upper right there, that was actually surveyed in 1867, so it's not included here. But that would show, at the time in '67, there weren't any homesteaders on Prairie Creek in '67. But here, there's a number of interesting things on there. And if you're digging through this sort of stuff, a lot of curious things turn up. Here's a detail, and you can see that it's a little blurry, apologies, but fishing establishment at the head of the lake there. And then we've got John McCall's place down there at the foot. John McCall was a really interesting character. He established basically the first fishery at Wallowa Lake. He was a one-legged Nicaraguan war vet that landed there, and basically the house he built there was the first resort at Wallowa County. You could come, stay at his place, use his boat, and he seined for fish and kegged and salted fish and sold those in Walla Walla, La Grande, Baker City, etc. But you can see he shows up here on this early 1881 plat map. And then another interesting one, I think, is this one. It was surveyed by Fullerton in '82, and basically just where we're at here. This is Sled Spring, so if you're on the North Highway there and you see that Sled Spring sign, that's where that is. But you'll see that what's happening here is, in this, gosh dang it, I'm hitting too many buttons. In this case, they've went ahead and recorded the entire Indian Trail as it existed in '82, and it plus or minus follows the North Highway. But just an interesting little detail of things that you can find on these maps. And then, of course, the survey field notes, interesting reading. So, of course, they're recording their day's activities, and it'll cover a whole bunch of stuff. Depending on the particular surveyor, some of them are really don't have much to say. Others of them will wax poetic, like William Odell has done here in his notes when they were doing the baseline survey in 1866. But you will find all kinds of interesting, curious little notes in there that you wouldn't find any other place as they were doing these surveys. The later ones, 82, 83, 84, you'll find bits about this homestead, that homestead, things like that. So, for, I think, folks who are interested in natural resource history here, you'll find lots of information about that. Beaver swamps and dams and all kinds of stuff. So really interesting, I think. And so as far as searching it, again, if you hit that tab on our website, it'll take you right there. You can search a number of different ways. In this case, I'm searching by name. I just use the pull down tabs for Oregon and Wallowa County, but otherwise you could search any state and county in the country. And I have James Tolley as an example, but you can just do it by township and range. If you're out somewhere and you run across a homestead here and you know the legal location by your map, you can just punch in 2 North 45, section 12, and anything that was claimed in that will come up. So easy way to search. You can see that here we're searching land patents. That's the homestead claims as opposed to the survey information or the plat books, the plat maps rather. Oops. And when I punched it in, this is the initial result I got. For James Tolley, I got 2 hits. He actually had 2 claims. The first one, which we mentioned, was an exemption, preemption, excuse me, where he paid $1.25 for his property. And you can see up at the top there, he did that in June 1880, and it's roughly 157 acres. And it's just outside of Wallowa there, where he homesteaded. This gizmo down here, this Esri map, if you check these boxes, it will zoom in on that location. Although I've noticed the last few days that map function for their website doesn't seem to be working very well. But I'm sure someone will notice and it'll come back online. And then, the newspapers, oh my gosh. On our website, you've got access to local papers and regional papers and national papers and international papers. And so the big 3 that we work with is the Advantage, that's the name of the company, Advantage Community History Archives for digitizing newspapers. We've also worked with the University of Oregon to do that. And then, of course, we use newspaper.com. But a couple interesting, at least from my perspective, things about all that. Oopsie. The editors and the writing of the editors is really interesting reading, I think. Of course, you're probably familiar with Levi Rouse, one of the editors of The Chieftain, before the turn of the century and after, and then E.S. McComas, who was editor of the Mountain Sentinel and a number of other papers in the Grand Round. The curious thing about both of them is they are entirely different writers. Rouse is real careful, not flamboyant, not inflammatory, where McComas is the exact opposite of that. Curiously, they both led very similar lives. They were both involved in local politics, including being elected to public office. They were both very interested in public education. They both were participated in some of the gold rushes. They have a lot in common, except their writing and their politics were very different. McComas was Democrat of the old school Democrat, think Southern Democrat, and Rouse was a Republican. I could have pulled out a billion different E.S. McComas bits of writing. That's him and his wife on the right, but this one strikes me as really characteristic of the type of writing that he did. He's quite a good writer, quite an entertaining writer, but he says he's speaking towards the nomination of Ulysses S. Grant in 1868 at the time, and he says, the Republican Party were aware of this when, in Convention of Chicago, they put in nomination the greatest ignoramus of the age, a man on whose garments rests the blood of 100,000 of his countrymen, sacrificed by his drunken obstinacy, in whom they have no confidence other than that he may be made a willing tool by designing wire pullers and unprincipled party leaders, one who has not one of the qualifications requisite for a statesman, who was suddenly cast to the surface from his haunts of debauchery by the revolution through which we have passed. Speaking of the Civil War, such is the situation of the mongrel, conglomerated mixture of white and black Negroes, carpetbaggers, and loyal thieves now sailing with a fair wind to destruction under the flaunting name of the National Union Republican Party. I will tell you that McComas was not for the 13th, 14th, 15th, or 16th Amendments to the Constitution at all. And then,
one that objected to the name Union County.
well, you know, it's complicated because no, he was in on the birth of Union County, and they were pro-union.
Right.
They were pro-union, except they didn't think black people should be allowed to vote at all. They thought that notion was ridiculous, and they thought that you should leave the South alone. Just walk away and not do the things that Ulysses S. Grant did, like try to stop the Ku Klux Klan from intimidating voters. So they just wanted the South to be left alone. One of the important things, of course, for us is correspondence and local reports. And we'll find these in a lot of different places. This is an example of the Oregon Scout on the University of Oregon's page, where we get a little blurb from Joseph, Oregon, from July 25, 85. So where we don't have an existing chieftain from the time, because we just have a scattering amount of them, we'll get these other regional reports, usually from people in these local communities. So you might get the Wallowa Warblings, you might get the Prairie Creek Prattlings, you might get they usually had sort of humorous names of these correspondents, but they'll write in and give the local news from all these little communities in Wallowa County, and they'll be covered in some of the regional papers, interesting little bits of history. You could see that the redfish are starting to come in small numbers up the lake in July. Or that, the soldiers at Fort Lapaway have got a trail from basically here out through Paradise and Deer Creek and across the river and back over to Lewiston in 85. And so searching these, easy way to do that, again, is go to the website. And you've got 3 tabs there. You've got the Oregon Digital Newspaper Program. That's going to take you to a set of papers that you can search. And then you've got the Wallowa History Center's set of papers that you can search, and then the Enterprise Library set of papers that you can search. And all of those have different selections and different issues to dig through. And so as far as the U of O site on Historic Oregon Newspapers, about a year ago or so, we worked with U of O to rephotograph the 19 surviving copies of the Wallowa Chieftain. And those are basically from its inception, 84 to 94, but we've only got 19 copies. The museum has, I think, 2 additional copies that haven't been digitized, but that is all that we have. And some of those years between 84 and 99, there are no copies. Like 85 might be 1, 86 might be 2. So it's just a smattering of chieftains from that time period. Now, if you go to the museum, of course, they recently acquired all of the papers from the Chieftain Archive. So starting in 99, they mostly have all the papers up to date. But the earlier ones, we just have those 19 or a bit more. And on this site, so it's all of Oregon, so you can search all the papers that have been digitized across Oregon. So if you search Wallowa, for instance, you'll come up with all the hits for all the papers that they have that mention Wallowa. When we don't have a corresponding paper from Wallowa County, that'll give you information that you wouldn't otherwise be able to find. Otherwise, all this stuff was on microfilm, and you would have to go read page by page by page through each edition of the papers. So a really handy resource. But again, pretty easy to search. Oops. Yeah, I would just say, yeah, you go to the website. You can filter by year. You can town, all kinds of stuff. But you can just throw a search term up in their search box and see what comes up. And again, you can filter that down by year or whatever you want to do. And then the 2 Wallowa County sites where you can search these papers, our site, the Wallowa History site, and the Enterprise Public Library. Gosh, the Enterprise Library has done a phenomenal job of getting these editions on there. They have stuff we don't, and vice versa. But you can check both those out. Again, really easy, just to punch in a search term in there and see what comes up, filter by year, by a particular paper, etc. The link is on and you don't have to download anything, you can just pull it up. These don't work, they're not formatted for a smartphone, so you have to do it on an iPad or on your laptop. And then just a smattering of the various papers that are on there. There's more, but you know, like the Flora Journal, we don't have all the editions of the Flora Journals, but that are in existence, and there's not that many, but there's about the better part of a year's worth on there. Joseph Herald, Wallowa Sun, you know, some that we only have a couple issues of, like the Border Signal from Enterprise, etc. So that is about it. A couple other things that we do is we use newspapers.com a lot because it's really good, but it's subscription based. So if you wanted to and you wanted to hit that up, it's pretty pricey. We just can't share out the password, of course, but if you come down, we can log you onto our laptop and you could search away all you wanted. And then, of course, we use Ancestry a ton. Same deal, subscription-based, costs money. We've got the international version, which is handy. So if you come down, you're looking for something particular, we could help you with that. And I just finish off, since our kind of thing is folks who are sort of interested in this place, some ways that things that we're working on if you want to get involved. One is we definitely take submissions for historical writing for the quarterly. And I am not a writer, but our editor, Mike Heiberger, is, so I wouldn't worry about your writing skill. He's a pretty good editor. He can clean things up, but basically open to anyone who had a piece on whatever related to Wallowa County history to throw a submission our way and have him take a look at it and get it in the quarterly. And then, of course, we do, since our whole thing is making a lot of these materials accessible, do a lot of scanning and digitizing. That's an example of that's Fanny Applegate Johnson and a letter that she wrote in '72. So there's a lot of work on that side, kind of fun. You'll never know sort of what treasures show up. Recently was looking at a count book from her husband, Joseph Johnson, of his time in the gold fields over in the panhandle of Idaho, Bannock City, Idaho City. It's really interesting reading. It's got his drawings, he's got some recipes in there, lists his provisions or how much gold they found on that day. Really rare account of that. So we just recently digitized that, but if you had an interest, any interest in that. The other thing we're working on is our interpretive center. Again, it won't be a museum. It will basically be exhibits going kind of chronologically through the history of the county, focus both on social and environmental history. And if you're interested in that kind of stuff, this is going to be kind of a massive editing job because we can't tell the whole story, but we'll be telling bits and pieces through there if you have interest in that. And then we haven't got this started wider, but historians group just coming, maybe we're working on the details, seeing how much interest there would be to meet once a month or once every couple months, and just people sharing what they're interested in, what they're working on. And so that's just an example of one of the documents I put together on fish and salmon in Wallowa County. It's, I don't know, 300 pages or so, still a work in progress. And then the other thing we were hoping to do is see how much interest there might be in reading Grace's book, which is a really great, solid book. As a group, we're calling it the Little Read, as opposed to the Big Read. Maybe 6 sessions and kind of go over it, read a portion, discuss a portion, read a portion, etc. The interesting thing about the time when that was written, now with all these resources, we also have additional things that have been found out that Grace didn't have access at the time, so it adds and sheds a little bit of new light on it. But the other thing up there in the corner, that's a sketch by Anna Vogel of the Chinese massacre. So we intend to, because a lot of these events in Wallowa County history, there's no photographs of, is solicit artist submissions for some of our exhibits on historical events. And so that's one she had been working on. But any interest in any of that or all of that?
David,
See Jenny.
you might mention our talk about editing Grace's book
Oh, yeah.
and submitting it. We both think the book ought to be republished because not only here, but it's almost a day-by-day account of the last tenure of Indians and the first 7 years of whites, 7 years of whites in a place in the United States. I mean, it's really a unique,
Yeah,
a unique look at that transition.
it is. Yep.
And I think it needs some, we would, with a book group and people reading it, we'd come up with questions and then be able to footnote or, make additions or whatever.
Yeah, and just an example of that, in 1872, J.H. Stevens and A.C. Smith, after they met with Joseph and Ollicott and some others in the Grand Ram Valley over the building of the road into Wallowa County, Smith and Stevens took off on horses to go visit Monteith at the Nez Perce Reservation. Well, when Grace was doing her research, she didn't have access to Smith's letter. He actually writes a letter that was published in one paper that, since they've digitized that paper, you can find it. So he gives an account of that meeting and what they said. But of course, Grace didn't have access at that time. But I would say, for my money, she's very engaging. I love her writing style, and she did her research. It's a fine piece of writing. That's for me. Really, yeah. But I'd end there. I don't know. Hopefully I didn't go over terribly long, unless there's a question or something. Yeah.
So when would the little read start? Or is it?
I